Moving to the last debutant, 5.12, Dave Marino, National Real Estate Director, Ontario General Manager, and multi-unit franchise owner, Spiritleaf Inc. and Inner Spirit Holdings Limited. Dave, welcome. You have 10 minutes to make your presentation. I would request that you stick to the time, and please feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just making sure everyone can hear me okay this morning.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and good morning through the chair to the council. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. And in addition to wearing many hats within Spiritleaf, similar to Nadia, I wanted to mention I'm also the father of 2 young boys under the age of 5. And part of why I came to this industry was to make sure that they grow up in a society where cannabis is more difficult for them to access than it was when I was an adolescent. And this presentation on the screen is a bit of the background on our company, which I'll speak to. It doesn't go slide by slide, so if you just want to scroll kind of one slide per 30 seconds, then you can see about our company as I speak about some of the issues that were mentioned, but also really want to focus on what I hear loudly and clearly are the main concerns, being zoning and clustering of stores. So just a bit of background on Spiritleaf. We currently operate 93 stores in 6 provinces and over 50 cities from coast to coast, including 30 in Ontario, all under the same brand, which is a publicly traded company. We currently have about 5% of market share, and a CIBC report last year said that market in Canada is approximately $4.1 billion in 2021, to answer that question. And since we opened one of the very first cannabis stores in this province on April 1st, 2019 in Kingston, we've established ourselves as leaders of reputable cannabis retail, like our colleagues on this call, and we actually brought some of the best practices here from other provinces, which are even more strict than Ontario in terms of licensing, location, zoning, and security. Many of the cities in which Spiritleaf operate in other provinces were able to establish all of their own cannabis rules, and we've frequently been involved at this political level to help to educate and inform council on the realities of the cannabis industry from those of us who operate within it, so that municipal policy can make decisions based on accurate, truthful, and honest feedback. The decision to opt into cannabis retail in the city of Mississauga is a decision to redirect the existing market away from organized crime and into safe and legitimate businesses. And as was just mentioned, although our stores are recreational and are strictly prohibited from giving any medical advice, there are many medical consumers who know exactly what products they need, and they are able to obtain those easier and with greater freedom of choice with physical retail stores. Spiritleaf operates as a franchise business model, so we empower local entrepreneurs who own 100% of their own business and retain 100% of their profits, while aligning with a nationally recognized brand to ensure that they conduct their business as a prudent business owner. Our franchise partners typically hire local suppliers and always employ local staff. To answer that question, it's typically on average around 10 people per store, with a mix of salaried, part-time, and full-time positions available at most locations. And on the question of how many jobs could that be, a common metric is the right number of stores around the area of 1 per 10,000 people, and so that could mean over 8,000 jobs for the right number of stores in Mississauga. As has been said many times, I think it's very clear that anyone in Mississauga who wants to purchase cannabis can and will do so. So continuing to disallow brick and mortar stores is only making it harder for your tax-paying residents to purchase a legal product, forcing them to either order delivery, often with added costs and wait times, or traveling to other regions, which is currently against public health and safety protocols during a pandemic. Or turn to the illicit market, which is certainly currently filling the gap that exists today, as has been well documented from the hundreds of illegal storefronts that have been shut down or continue to operate today. So cannabis will be bought and sold in Mississauga, that is for certain. Our decision is to choose the legal market over the current illegal market. I wanted to address any misconceptions about legal cannabis stores and how they can be easily distinguished from illicit ones based on the very strict AGCO requirements that have been mentioned today. Things like the inspections, the use of the secret shoppers, AGCO stickers on the door, no visibility of cannabis or accessories from outside the premises, all the cannabis being pre-packaged, sealed, tested and approved by Health Canada. None of these currently apply to the illegal storefronts in your city. Regarding the odors, this is a common concern with landlords, and I am also a real estate broker licensed in 3 provinces, so negotiating the leases, I can tell you, landlords are also concerned about noxious odors, and we often have in our leases that the tenants will mitigate those, but I can tell you that that has not materialized, and there's less odors coming from cannabis stores than from things like aesthetics, bakeries, etc. There's also store security camera footage requirements. Our store in St. Catharines used our security footage recently to catch a thief who robbed a bank in the similar plaza. So our stores are actually contributing to stopping crime in the communities that we're in. We even have a franchisee who wanted to open a store in Mississauga, but due to the decision to opt out, he was forced to go to an adjacent municipality and actually open that store and invested his money in water down in Hamilton instead. So we must consider all of these, the positive financial impacts of this as well. I think right now with the pandemic especially, this is really an economic necessity. The devastating impact of COVID has left us no choice but to allow all legal businesses to fill the gap, literal vacancies left by thousands of stores that have closed. And the cost to build these stores was a question, I think, as well. I'm sure there's a wide range, but I think most reputable retailers often spend anywhere between $250,000 to well over $600,000 to build, with enormous direct and indirect beneficiaries in the local economy. Think of all the designers, contractors, painters, electricians, plumbers, HVAC contractors, security companies, structural engineers, artists, graphic designers, musicians, signage companies, and most importantly, the thousands of good-paying jobs that would be created at a time when so many people need work right now, especially from the hospitality and travel industries. And all of these, although there's no business license permit, of course they would need building permits, which revenue would go to the city. And regarding the charitable aspects of the industry, many retailers give back in various ways, like community cleanups, food drives, etc., that are legally permitted. And including Spiritleaf, we've actually aligned with the Gord Downey Cheney Wenjack Fund, which was inspired by Cheney's story and Gord's call to build a better Canada. This fund aims to build cultural understanding and create a path towards reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. So in 2018, Spiritleaf established a 5-year charitable commitment, as well as a legacy room to help educate Canadians about the history of residential schools and the story of Cheney Wenjack. For these efforts, in part, this past Sunday at the Juno Awards on CBC, Gord's band of 30 Years, the Tragically Hip, were awarded the Humanitarian Award presented by Music Canada to recognize outstanding contributions by Canadian artists to humanitarian contributions, which have positively enhanced the social fabric of Canada and whose impacts can be felt worldwide. Based on recent events, there is need now more than ever for the legal cannabis industry to allow residents of Mississauga to join in these charitable efforts. The products we sell have been discussed a lot, so I'm going to skip over that because we know they're all highly tested and regulated, and that there's relatively low levels of intoxication that can be achieved from a single package, especially compared to alcohol and the levels of intoxication, including death, that can be achieved from consuming a single bottle from the LCBO. Also, legal stores have typically more consumption methods available than illegal ones do, which may allow for less inhalation via oils and edibles, and all come in child-safe packaging, as we've seen. So we've also talked about how Mississauga will in fact have a say in every single proposed cannabis store location. And I know the stats that have been mentioned about the fact that those concerns have not been successful, but I don't think that means that those concerns have not been heard and considered, but rather that the concerns do not justify presenting the license on the basis for which the licenses should be granted.
1 minute remaining.
Okay, I'm gonna skip, because I'm the real estate guy, just to mention about clustering, I know is a big concern. So typically, most large cannabis stores would prefer to locate in large retail plazas where they get an exclusive to be the only one cannabis store in that property. And it's been mentioned that many other industries cluster, like bars and restaurants or fashion stores in malls, and there's not seen anything wrong with this. I think if there's nothing wrong with having one cannabis store in your community. There should be nothing wrong with having multiple ones of them side by side, and in fact can create a destination for successful business. So just a summary and conclude, and I'd be happy to answer more questions afterwards on clustering and zoning in particular, but I think Mississauga must make the decision to opt into cannabis retail, which is a decision to vote against the organized crime alternative. Thank you very much.
Time. Thank you, Dave. There's Councillor Daskell has a question for you. Go ahead, Councillor Daskell.
Thank you to the chair. I appreciate the presentation. Just one question I had for clarification, I guess, is you were mentioning about people working in the stores being good paying jobs. I'm just curious because I don't know, is what would the average worker at the counter be making per hour?
Well, thank you for the question. And of course, there is going to be a wide range in terms of the number of people at each store and what they are making. But as was discussed by Fire and Flower and the rents that cannabis stores can pay, I mean, rents are a function of sales, and sales at cannabis stores, and you're asking for an average. I mean, our average across our chain is 1.8 million per store. So people at these stores can often be making more than minimum wage and more than they may be making at a similar type of retail establishment based on the sales that are achievable from these stores. But of course, that will vary greatly from store to store.
Okay, so maybe I could ask it a little bit of a different direction. If you were posting a job advertisement to hire somebody to work behind the counter, what would you offer them in terms of an hourly salary range?
I'd say our average stores in the province of Ontario have a few different levels. At a cannabis concierge or bud tender level, you may be in the $17 to $18 per hour range. As a key holder or assistant manager, you may be closer to the $20 per hour or above range. And for a manager of a store, you may be on a salary of $50,000 or $60,000 per year. And I think those are comparable or strong compared to other similar retail businesses. And the fact is, so many other businesses have failed because of COVID. We need retail stores to fill that gap, fill the vacancies, and provide jobs for people in Mississauga.
All right, so the jobs that you're talking about, they would just be more or less similar to other retail operations in different industries then. Okay, that was my main question I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daskell, followed by Councillor Parrish.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious, when I looked at the report that was prepared for us from October 15th, 2020 to May 31st, 2021, there was an increase of 155 stores opening. Are you like the liquor stores in that they stayed open even while everything else closed? Were you allowed to stay open?
Well, thank you for the question, and I think that's another bit of a hypocrisy between the liquor and cannabis, but we were at one point deemed to be essential retail. That decision was later changed, so cannabis stores in Ontario are currently deemed to be non-essential retail, which have been forced to close, and as of this Friday will be permitted to reopen at 15% on the province's schedule.
Okay, your answer was a little bit garbled at the beginning because your mic wasn't on properly. At what point, what month, what date were you told you were not essential?
I do not have that date, but it was a very brief period when things like what is essential and what is not was being established, probably in around the time of May 2020 during the initial lockdowns. That's when at one point cannabis was deemed essential, which obviously the industry will agree with because we've done so much work to displace the illicit market with the legal one that by forcing legal stores to close, all you're doing is forcing people to go back to their illicit dealers.
I understand all that, but so you're saying around May 2020 you were told you were no longer essential. So from May 2020 to May 2021, you still went up with increased by 155 stores. Is that correct? all over Ontario.
I believe that is correct, and these stores, as non-essential retailers like many others in that category, were permitted to offer their products for sale through curbside pickup and delivery only.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Thanks for your delegation.
Thank you. And I have a question, Dave. And I did want to say that I'm not sure one can compare the smell of baking with which I think is universally loved, and the smell of cannabis, which depends. Some people do like it and some not so much. I just wanted to understand the issue of clustering, because you suggested that clustering is good for business, but that is my main concern, because I would not want Cooksville, for instance, to become a cluster with 4 or 5 cannabis stores, and as you call it, a destination for cannabis. In the same way that I wouldn't want Cooksville to become a destination for liquor stores. So it's not per se cannabis, but it would probably be the same. So there's a difference between clustering of a clothing store or groceries and clustering of something like cannabis or liquor stores, because there are other issues around protecting our youth and the illegal stuff that sort of hangs around wherever there's a cluster as well. So just wanted your thoughts on that in that framework. To compare it to other clusters may not be entirely correct.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for the questions. And if I could just speak to the first one, my comment about noxious odors. We commonly have landlords who are concerned about the odors coming from cannabis stores, to the point where they require our leases to put the onus on the tenant to add any additional venting that may be required for any noxious odors. We have that in many of our leases, and not once have we ever had to do any additional venting, because the fact is the cannabis arrives at the store completely sealed containers with lids on them. It is not allowed to be opened in the store or consumed on the premises, so it is typically taken home for consumption, and that's why these stores produce less smells than bakeries and aesthetics. It has nothing to do with the subjective nature of liking a smell or not. It's just the abundance or the lack thereof. On your second question regarding clustering, really the concerns with clustering, in my opinion, are a result of the stigma around cannabis and cannabis stores, which, as we've heard numerous times from the deputants today, are simply not true, and that those concerns have not materialized, and the sky has not fallen, as we've heard many times today. I think it's important to say that retailers also do not want clusters. The clusters lead to competition and price wars, and they make it difficult for retailers to compete. They're bad for us, but they're good for your citizens, because it gives them the freedom of choice, and it leads to lower prices, which will have a greater opportunity of displacing the illicit market. And we have to remember, this is a free market, and if there's no issues with one store, there likely should not be issues with multiple stores nearby. And really, the market will determine the right number of stores. If 6 stores open within a few block radius, over time, if the market is not big enough, then the ones who provide the worst prices, products, and service and experience will fail. And I think it's important that everyone should have the opportunity to compete. I mean, if someone wants to open a coffee shop anywhere they want, they're allowed to do that. Some people may prefer the big national brand, some prefer the local independent, and they should both have the opportunity to exist and compete. And if they do well, they'll succeed, and if they don't, they will fail.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Dave. That sort of brings us to the end of our deputations. I'm looking for someone to move this deputation. Councillor McFadden. All those in favor? Any opposed? So at this point, we can either bring forward 9.4